In 2010, the body of Argentinian model Joana Casas was found just before her 20th birthday. She had been shot twice in the head and was left in a field. Her former boyfriend was soon convicted of the murder and sentenced to 13 years in prison. 3 years later, while still in prison, the man ended up falling in love with Joana's twin sister Edith. Despite her parents intervening, Edith went on to marry her twin sister's murderer. In 2008, a Kansas man named Corey McFerrin called 911 claiming there was something wrong with his girlfriend. When authorities arrived, they were horrified to find that his 35-year-old girlfriend had been sitting on the toilet for at least 2 years. Her skin had grown around the toilet seat and had to be surgically removed at the hospital. Her boyfriend claimed that because of her troubled childhood, she felt safe in the bathroom and never left. In 1984, comedian Tommy Cooper died of a heart attack while performing live on stage. Thinking it was all part of the show, the audience continued to laugh and clap as the man was gasping for air. In 1300 BC, Egyptian King Meneptah defeated the Libyans in battle. To prove of his triumph, he brought back 6,000 tan bananas that he cut off of opposing soldiers. When a very tall man dies and can't afford a custom coffin, the undertaker will often chop off his feet and place them beside his legs. The family doesn't notice because only the top half of the coffin is open during the funeral. In 2015, a woman claimed that she could smell Parkinson's disease. To test this, doctors gave her 12 shirts to smell and 6 of them were from Parkinson's patients. She correctly identified the 6 shirts but also chose one from the control group. 8 months later, that person was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, is said to have lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her death in 1851. In North Korea, viewing or selling porn is strictly forbidden and is said to be punishable by death. If you win the lottery, you're about 20 times more likely to be murdered than the average person. In 2016, a seemingly abandoned yacht drifted towards some fishermen off the coast of the Philippines. But when they boarded the ship, they found the mummified remains of a German man who had been missing for 7 years. To this day, the man's cause of death remains a mystery. In 2009, actor Dean Winters suffered from a bacterial infection and died in the ambulance but was revived. After recovering, he developed gangrene and had multiple amputations and skin grafts. He is now better known for playing Mayhem in Allstate insurance commercials. Janis Joplin changed her will just 2 days before dying at the age of 27. She gave her estate to her parents and gave additional cash to her siblings. She even set aside $2,500 for her friends to throw a party in her honor and to, quote, get blasted after I'm gone. Cat burning was a form of entertainment in France prior to the 1800s. People would gather cats in a net and burn them over a bonfire while they laughed and cheered. This was done mainly because cats were associated with witchcraft and were burned as symbols of the devil. In 2012, a Jesus statue in India had water mysteriously dripping from its toes. Worshippers flocked from all over to collect and sometimes drink this miracle water. But soon enough, the source of the water was found to be a clogged toilet near the statue. After the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Chinese government sent bills to the families of the protesters for the cost of the bullets used to kill their loved ones. Over the last 10 years, about 10 Americans have been accidentally shot by dogs. 5 of them happened in Florida. Jeremy Rodale was a longevity expert who popularized the term organic food. While filming an interview for the Dick Cavett Show, he declared, "I've decided to live to be 100 and I've never felt better in my life." But minutes later, Rodale died of a heart attack while still being filmed. In 1903, Topsy the elephant was executed by poisoning, strangulation, and electrocution. A 74-second video of the electrocution was recorded and preserved by Thomas Edison. It may have been the first time ever that death was captured in a motion picture film. In 1854, a 13-year-old boy died in San Francisco after a circus clown swung him around by the heels. A Frenchman named Tarare was famous in the 1700s for his endless appetite. He was reported to have eaten live snakes, cats, lizards, and puppies. In one case, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting. While being treated in a hospital for his condition, he was caught trying to drink other patients' blood and eat corpses from the morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. In 1991, Patricia Stallings was sentenced to life in prison for poisoning her child with antifreeze. She then gave birth to a second child while in prison, who was given to a foster care. But he eventually became sick with the same symptoms as the first child, indicating a rare metabolic disorder, not poisoning. This proved her innocence and she was later released. In a Mexican prison in 2020, two rival drug cartels decided to have a friendly soccer match. Things must have gotten out of hand pretty quickly since the match ended with 16 people dead. In 1975, it was revealed that the CIA had developed a heart attack gun that fired a dart of frozen water and shellfish toxin. Once inside the body, it would melt, leaving only a small red mark on the victim. The official cause of death would always be a heart attack. While getting into character for the Jobs movie, Ashton Kutcher tried Steve Jobs' diet, but he ended up in a hospital because it messed with his pancreas levels. It's likely no coincidence that Steve Jobs died from pancreatic cancer. Albert Einstein's last words were lost forever because he said them in German, which the nurse attending to him did not speak. The disclaimer of no animals were harmed during the making of this film isn't always true. It can be put on movies even if animals died during the production, as long as cameras weren't rolling at the time. The Heart Attack Grill is a restaurant in Las Vegas where people weighing over 350 pounds can eat for free. 3 people have died while eating there, and the only vegan option on the menu is cigarettes. In her Firefox search history, Casey Anthony had foolproof suffocation methods from the day before her daughter died. But police overlooked this evidence because they only checked her search history from Internet Explorer. Throughout his life, Ernest Hemingway survived malaria, anthrax, pneumonia, dysentery, skin cancer, diabetes, hepatitis, a ruptured kidney, spleen, and liver, a crushed vertebrae, and a fractured skull. He also survived 2 separate plane crashes in a 2-day span while on an African safari. In 2013, a French businessman died of a heart attack while having an affair with a stranger during a company trip. A French court ruled that this was an industrial accident and that his wife and family were entitled to compensation. The death of Metallica singer James Hetfield's mom inspired him to write the song The God That Failed. She died when he was 16 due to Christian beliefs influencing her to reject cancer treatment. In 1999, a waitress was tipped a lottery ticket and won $10 million. She was then sued by her colleagues for their share. Afterwards, she was sued by the man who tipped her the ticket. Then she was kidnapped by her ex-husband and ended up shooting him in the chest. Lastly, she went to court against the IRS for more than a decade before finally winning. In 1825, painter Samuel Morse received a letter which read that his wife was sick. The next day, he received a new letter which read that she had died. 2 days later, he went to see his wife one last time only to discover she had already been buried. Distraught over the slowness of long-distance communication, he invented the Morse code. In 1977, Bob Marley was diagnosed with skin cancer on his toe and was told that having it amputated would stop the spread. But he refused the surgery since his Rastafarian religion saw amputation as a sin. By summer of 1980, the cancer had metastasized throughout Marley's entire body, and he died soon afterwards. When 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo died from the Spanish flu in 1920, her grieving father insisted on her being preserved. Known as the Sleeping Beauty, she was one of the last to be buried in Sicily's Capuchin catacombs. This photo was taken in 1982, 62 years after she died. In the year 2000, a partially paralyzed old man was in his outhouse when the floor suddenly collapsed. He fell through and was immediately surrounded by excrement, spiders, maggots, and rats. He was stuck for more than 3 days until his mailman thankfully found him. 5 hours before he was confirmed to be dead, somebody posted about Michael Jackson's death on Wikipedia with nearly exact details. No one paid attention because everyone thought it was just a prank, so no details about the original poster were ever found. While masks may save human lives, the same can't be said for wildlife. In 2020 alone, an estimated 1.5 billion masks ended up in our oceans. A British teenager was arrested after beating and stabbing 2 girls because they called him Harry Potter. In 2009, a man sued Pepsi when he was traumatized after finding a mouse in his Mountain Dew. But Pepsi attorneys said this was impossible since Mountain Dew would completely dissolve a mouse in 30 days. Pepsi won the case upon showing that the can was purchased 74 days after it was manufactured. In 1979, the King of Persia ordered the execution of 2 servants for being too loud. But since it was a holiday, he postponed their executions by 1 day and made the servants return to their duties. That night, they assassinated the king in his sleep. The FBI estimates that there are between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the US at any given time. When a person is executed by electric chair, they feel everything. They are fully aware of their bodies being fried as it happens in real time. One inmate who survived the first round of electrocution said it tasted exactly like cold peanut butter. A Japanese schoolgirl once died because a teacher crushed her head in the school gate. The principal said it was the student's fault because the gate had to be closed at exactly 8:30 and she was late. When Bono was 14, his mother suffered an aneurysm at her own father's funeral and later died. Bono said the grief in his heart at the time was a big part of why he turned to music. A German shepherd named Tommy attends Mass every day at his local church in Italy. This is because his owner had her funeral there and he hopes that one day she will return. Australian vegan Maria Stridham wanted to prove that vegans can do anything by climbing Mount Everest. Sadly, she died while descending as a result of severe altitude sickness. In 1929, 2 scientists at Princeton University successfully turned a live cat into a telephone. They connected its auditory nerve to a transmitter, and when one researcher spoke through the cat's ear, the other could hear it through the receiver. The experiment was viewed as groundbreaking and led to the invention of cochlear implants. This is a photo of Princess Diana consoling Elton John at the funeral of Gianni Versace. Just over a month later, Diana would die in a car accident and Elton would perform at her funeral. Jean Calment lived to the age of 122 and was the oldest living human in history. She smoked cigarettes for 96 years from the age of 21 and only decided to quit 5 years before she died. If you're ever bitten or scratched by a wild animal, go get a rabies shot immediately. The way rabies kills, once you show symptoms, there's no way to treat it and you will almost certainly die. In 1957, a woman attending an MLB game was hit with a foul ball that broke her nose. The game was briefly paused and resumed once the woman was put on a stretcher. As they carried her away, the very next pitch was fouled off and hit the same woman, breaking a bone in her knee. If you don't want wrinkles but would prefer to stay away from Botox, this woman has a solution for you. To avoid wrinkles, Tess Christian claims to have not laughed or smiled for more than 40 years, even after the birth of her daughter. The individual animal with the most human kills ever was a tiger from northern India. After a tooth injury from a gunshot left her unable to hunt normal prey, she adjusted her hunting style to go for humans instead. She was shot and killed in 1907 with an estimated 436 human kills. Jeannie Wiley was locked in a room for 13 years by her father, who wanted to protect her from the outside world. He kept her tied in a straitjacket and would bark at her like a wild dog if she made any noise. When she was finally rescued, doctors said she had the cognitive abilities of a 1-year-old baby. Snake wine has been considered a therapeutic alcoholic beverage for thousands of years in China. It is produced by infusing venomous snakes in grain alcohol and is said to reinvigorate a person. This abandoned fawn was found curled up next to a fake deer that was used for target practice. This is a 1964 photo of Black Reverend Joe Carter preparing to face the Klan after he tried to vote. During tests in South Korea, access to all rooftops are typically locked. This is because students have been known to throw themselves off the roof due to the pressure of the exam. In 2005, one sheep decided to jump off a cliff, causing nearly 1,500 others to follow. However, only the first 450 were killed since the remaining animals' falls were cushioned by the dead bodies below. Sloths only have enough energy for their weekly toilet trip to the jungle floor. So if their baby ever falls to the ground, they must choose to preserve their energy and leave it to be eaten. A San Francisco man tweeted this just 5 minutes before being the victim of a random drive-by shooting. In 2015, a Colombian man had a tapeworm inside of him that got cancer. The cancer then metastasized and the man eventually died from tumors of tapeworm throughout his entire body. A 24-year-old nurse in India was set on fire by her ex-boyfriend after she rejected his advances. But police say the woman caught hold of him tightly so that he couldn't escape after killing her. While the woman died on the spot, the man suffered for days before succumbing to his injuries during treatment. This is why saturation diving is one of the highest paying jobs in the world. In 1983, 4 rig workers were working deep in a diving chamber in the North Sea. When one of the men opened a hatch too early, the chamber quickly depressurized and dropped from 9 atmospheres of pressure to 1 in less than a second. All 4 men were killed instantly as the pressure was so explosive that it caused 3 of the divers' blood to flash boil. The 4th diver wasn't any luckier as he was forced through a small opening and violently torn apart. According to the autopsy, all of the organs of his chest were launched out of his body and projected upwards more than 30 feet. All of the men likely died immediately, but the investigators were never the same after discovering such a gruesome scene. Kim Jong-un travels with his own toilet to prevent his excretions from falling into the wrong hands. The waste contains important information about his health status and can't be left behind. In the 1960s, the CIA spent $20 million on a cat equipped with gear to spy on the Soviets. Sadly, the operation was cancelled when the cat was hit and killed by a taxi almost immediately. A 115-year-old woman from Nepal has been smoking at least 1 pack of cigarettes per day since 1920. She claims that smoking has aided in her longevity and that all the doctors who advised her to quit have already died. The Grinch as a kid was played by an 18-year-old actor with dwarfism. Sadly, he died of heart failure just 2 years after the movie released. In child porn cases, someone has to actually watch the video from beginning to end so that they can testify about it in court. This was a banquet for French soldiers who received horrible injuries during World War I. A woman posted this photo on Reddit to show the progression of Alzheimer's through her mother's crocheting. From left to right, the squares show her mother's decline over a 2-year span. Male dolphins have been known to violently rape female dolphins in groups. They've also been observed killing dolphin calves so that the calf's mother will feel more inclined to mate with them. Despite growing up deaf and blind, Helen Keller was a supporter of eugenics. She believed that infants who were born with severe mental or physical disabilities were better off dying. Tobacco companies spend the most money on advertising during the month of January. This is because January is when most people are trying to quit as New Year's resolutions. This is a photo of an Iraqi officer with a fearless expression on his face just moments before being beheaded by an ISIS militant. Male otters have been known to violently rape female otters, baby seals, and other sea creatures. Sadly, this often results in death for the victims since the male otter will sometimes bite and drown them to get his way. Mike Tyson got into his first fight after a bully ripped the head off of one of his pigeons. He said that the pigeon was the first thing that he ever loved and inspired him to become a fighter. There are more Panda Express locations in the world than actual pandas. When people die from Alzheimer's, it's usually because the disease got so bad that they forgot how to swallow or breathe. There's a blue whale who sings at such a high frequency that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Nicknamed 52 Blue, his calls have been heard every year since the 1980s but never receive a response. He's been called the world's loneliest whale. After being convicted for the murder of Deborah Reese in 1993, Liddell Lee maintained his innocence for 24 years. Before his execution in 2017, his last words were, "I am an innocent man." Just a few days ago, a different man's DNA was found on the murder weapon. Female ducks are raped so frequently that many species have developed a second decoy vagina through evolution. They can offer it to intruders that they don't want to be impregnated by. Only 1 out of every 1,000 sea turtles born actually make it to adulthood. Fatal familial insomnia is a rare incurable brain disease that progressively destroys your brain's ability to sleep. Eventually, you stop sleeping altogether, go completely insane, suffer from seizures, and die from cardiac arrest. This is a photo of a professional violinist playing her instrument as surgeons remove a tumor from her brain. Doctors asked her to play the violin so that her musical abilities wouldn't be damaged during the procedure. A man spent 5 years writing a 2,000-page suicide note about the meaningless of life before taking his own life at Harvard University. His family and friends received the massive note in a posthumous email. The note is still available online and can still be read today. In 1944, a group of American airmen were shot down by the Japanese. Out of the 10 men, 9 of them were captured, tortured, executed, and cannibalized. The only man who evaded capture and survived was future President George H.W. Bush. In 2003, a woman from Texas hit a homeless man with her car and his body became lodged in her windshield. She drove home with him still stuck in the car and repeatedly apologized to the man when he was in her garage. But she never called for help and the man died 2 days later as the woman received 50 years in prison. Dodo birds were very friendly and curious animals since they had no natural predators. And then we came along and killed them all. For animal testing involving dogs, most laboratories use beagles because they're the most forgiving of humans inflicting pain on them. In the 1920s, the federal government poisoned alcohol in an effort to curb consumption during Prohibition. As a result, more than 10,000 Americans died from poisoning by their own government. After Vincent van Gogh shot himself in the chest with a revolver, he managed to walk home and see 2 doctors. But since neither of them was a surgeon, they couldn't remove the bullet, and they left him alone in his room smoking a pipe. He died the next morning with his brother by his side, who said Vincent's last words were, "The sadness will last forever." A girl who grew up in Auschwitz drew this picture of home while living in a residence for disturbed children. When Elvia Cortez went to feed her cows one morning, 4 men quickly approached her and put a bomb around her neck. They left a tape asking for $7,500 and threatened to set off the bomb if she tried to disarm it. Elvia called the police and a bomb tech showed up later in the day to remove it. A few hours later, the bomb suddenly went off and killed both of them, and the men responsible were never found. Lama Itigilov was a Buddhist said to have reached nirvana, the final goal of Buddhism. This is due to the lifelike state of his corpse, which is not subject to macroscopic decay even though he was never embalmed. He died in 1927, and upon the latest examination in 2005, scientists stated his body was in the condition of someone who had died just 36 hours ago. In 2009, an Indian doctor removed 172,000 kidney stones from a single kidney. Both the patient and surgeon now hold Guinness World Records that will hopefully never be broken. In 1961, Soviet doctor Leonid Rogozov was working in Antarctica when he realized he had appendicitis. He knew he would die if his appendix wasn't removed, but he was the only doctor on the expedition. So he ended up performing the surgery on himself and miraculously recovered. Within the walls of Alcatraz, Al Capone's brain completely melted due to untreated neurosyphilis. It got to the point where he would throw his feces at the other inmates and was paroled early because he was deemed too much of a lost cause to be a threat. When he died at the age of 48, he had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. While Charles Darwin is famous for his work on evolution, he also killed and tasted every species of animal that he discovered. As many as 3 U.S. presidents, as well as Abe Lincoln's son, likely died as a result of contaminated water in the White House. Until 1850, there was no sewage system, and a field of human excrement called night soil flowed freely into the water supply. When Pablo Picasso died in 1973, his wife wouldn't allow their grandson Pablito attend the funeral. Little Pablito responded by drinking a bottle of bleach, which damaged his organs so badly that he couldn't eat anymore. After 3 months of suffering, he died. Lake Nyos in Cameroon periodically releases a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide that suffocates everything within a 16-mile radius. In 1986, 1,700 people and all of their livestock suddenly died without even understanding what was happening to them. In 1949, Timothy Evans was wrongly executed for murdering his wife and daughter. The actual murderer, John Christie, was a prosecution witness at Evans's trial. After Evans was executed, Christie went on to kill 4 more people. The government didn't acknowledge that Evans was innocent until 2004. Described by the media as the world's worst serial killer, Luis Garavito is responsible for the rape and murder of over 100 young boys. After a total of only 22 years served, he will be released from Colombian prison this year. After teenager Amy Billig disappeared in 1974, her mother began receiving phone calls from a man claiming Amy was serving as his slave. The chilling calls continued for more than 20 years, but the case was never solved. In 1933, a doctor named Carl Tanzler raided the grave of a female patient with whom he'd become obsessed before she died. He stole her body from the tomb and lived with her corpse for 7 years. As her body fell apart, he attached the bones together using coat hangers and fitted her face with glass eyes. He was only caught when someone saw him dancing with the corpse in front of an open window. The owner of Ray's Sausages spent nearly $30,000 to combat the foul smell said to be coming from his shop. It was later discovered that the odors were actually coming from the rotting victims of his neighbor, serial killer Anthony Sowell. Replacement teeth were once made from the teeth of dead soldiers after they were scavenged from the battlefield. This is the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald sitting at the bottom of Lake Superior. The 700-foot freighter sank in 1975, taking the lives of all 29 men on board. The bodies were never recovered and are said to be well preserved even today due to the cold waters. Since 1946, the Russians believed they had a piece of Hitler's skull, serving as evidence that he died. But in the year 2000, it was discovered that the skull fragment had actually belonged to a middle-aged woman. In 2016, an Indonesian pop star died on stage after she was bitten by the king cobra she was dancing with. She kept performing for 45 minutes before succumbing to the snake's venom. A German shepherd named Tolero stayed next to the body of his owner for 23 days after he had died in a snowstorm. He prevented animals from attacking the body and tried to keep his owner warm by sleeping by his side. In 1937, a gas leak in the basement of a school in Texas caused a massive explosion that killed 300 children. It was the deadliest school disaster in U.S. history and was so tragic that even Adolf Hitler sent his condolences. This photo was taken by a paramedic in 2015 outside of a hospital in California. It shows an ER doctor who stepped outside to cry for a moment after losing a 19-year-old patient. Minutes later, he walked back in the building with his head held high and continued on to his next patient. In the 1940s, Mike the Chicken lived for 18 months after his head was axed off. He only died after choking on a kernel of corn. In 2010, Mexican singer Sergio Vega publicly denied a news report that he had been murdered. Hours later, he was murdered. A Massachusetts man named Kenny Waters was wrongly imprisoned for 18 years for murder. He was finally freed in 2001 after his high school dropout sister went to law school to prove his innocence. Just 6 months after he was released, he died in a freak accident. In 2012, a British man went into a coma after getting in a bad car accident. When he woke up, he could speak fluent French and genuinely believed that he was Matthew McConaughey. Veterinarians take their own lives at 3 times the rate of the average person. This is partly due to online trolling and threats from pet owners who blame them for the death of a pet. Another reason is that vets can often tell when animals have been abused by their owners, but there's very little that they can do about it. Due to the skin's elasticity, it takes 3 full rotations to remove the human head. In 1847, a doctor performed an amputation so fast that he accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers as well. Both the patient and assistant eventually died from sepsis, while a spectator apparently died from shock. This resulted in the only known procedure with a 300% mortality rate. Martin Luther King Jr. was tragically assassinated when he was just 39 years old. However, an autopsy revealed that he had the heart of a 60-year-old, likely due to stress. This is a photo of 2 elephants embracing one last time before being separated for a lifetime of serving man. A deaf man was stabbed and killed in North Carolina just for communicating. He was simply signing to his friend when a local gang member mistook the conversation for gang signs. BBC regularly rehearses the Queen's death to ensure that their cover of it is flawless when she actually does die. 4 people were killed during a Rolling Stones concert in 1969, but the overall population of the concert didn't change. This was because 4 babies were born during the concert as well. This photo was taken of a group of people who crashed into the Andes in 1972. They were eventually saved but had to resort to cannibalism to survive for nearly 3 months. They're all smiling in the photo, but it becomes quite disturbing when you realize there's a human spine on the ground next to them. When actor-comedian Red Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set, nobody offered to help him. This was because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. When James Bulger went missing in 1993, police became optimistic when they found out he was last seen with children. Sadly, this was a false hope, since the two boys who kidnapped James went on to torture him for hours before leaving him for dead on some train tracks. His body was found so horribly mutilated that coroners couldn't even determine how he died. When she was 16 years old, Annalise Michaels started eating her own hands and drinking her own urine while suffering from seizures and delusions. But her devout Christian family denied medical reasoning and instead blamed the devil. She underwent 67 exorcisms and weighed less than 70 pounds at the time of her negligent death. If you're close enough to a nuclear blast, you'll die with no pain because the explosion will kill you faster than your brain can detect pain. This eerie 1986 Twin Towers advertisement speaks for itself. In 1989, a Los Angeles woman received a phone call from her brother-in-law saying that her ex-husband was on his way to kill her. She dialed 911 but was told nothing could be done unless he showed up at her house. Within 15 minutes, he arrived, killing her and 4 other women who were celebrating her 27th birthday. When a woman with breast implants is cremated, the implants will melt into a goo. It then drips to the bottom of the furnace and must be cleaned up once it is cooled. A South African politician used to love his Mercedes so much that his last wish was to be buried while sitting in it. A man was once so angry about losing a knife fight in CSGO that he spent 6 months tracking down his opponent and stabbed him in real life. If you had smallpox scars in the 18th century, you were more likely to get hired. The scars proved that you already had smallpox and couldn't pass it on to your employers. The symptoms of schizophrenia are shaped by culture. Americans with schizophrenia tend to be more paranoid and experience harsher voices and hallucinations. In India and Africa, schizophrenic people tend to hear voices that are more playful and positive. This is a World War II photo of a Japanese boy waiting for his turn to cremate his dead baby brother in Nagasaki. Photographer Joe O'Donnell said the boy was biting his lips so hard to avoid crying that it was bleeding. If your lungs were completely opened up and laid flat, they would cover the entire size of a tennis court. When the mummy of Ramses II was transported in 1974, it was issued an Egyptian passport that listed his occupation as deceased king. This 1955 device allowed the user to smoke an entire pack of cigarettes at once. Alzheimer's disease doesn't affect emotional memory as strongly as informational memory. As a result, Alzheimer's patients who are told bad news will often forget the news but will remain sad and have no idea why. The singer of Peanut Butter Jelly Time died after an 11-hour standoff with police in 2002. During the ordeal, his brother-in-law Snoop Dogg attempted to calm him down and convince him to surrender. Your intestines know how to get back in the right place. When performing abdominal surgery and the intestines need to be moved, the doctor will simply stuff them back in. There's a condition called Ondine's curse which causes sufferers to die if they fall asleep. The only treatment is for patients to wear a ventilator every time they sleep. In 2001, a man donated his kidney to his wife who was suffering from renal failure. 8 years later, when his wife filed for divorce, he demanded her to return the kidney or pay over $1 million. In 2006, the Miami Hurricanes football team gathered in prayer for their teammate Brian Pata, who had been shot and killed. 15 years later, his teammate Rashawn Jones has been charged with his murder. This is why you should never smash someone's face into a birthday cake without knowing what's inside of it. A Florida lifeguard was fired for saving someone who was drowning because he went outside of his designated area. The executioner from the infamous Vietnam War photo opened a pizza joint in Virginia after the war. When elephants lose a mate, they sometimes refuse to eat and will lie down and shed tears until they starve to death. They're the only animals known to die as a result of heartbreak. Arnold Schwarzenegger has said in many interviews that O.J. Simpson was originally casted to play the Terminator. The main reason he wasn't is that James Cameron didn't think O.J. would be believable as a killer. This is a rare photograph of Ted Bundy having fun with kids in his neighborhood. It serves as a stark reminder of how easily a monstrous person can blend in with society. You can bite off your own finger as easily as you can bite off a carrot, but your brain prevents it. In 2002, a Chechen terrorist attack in a Moscow theater left 130 people dead, but only one of them was killed by terrorists. The other 129 were killed by Russian special forces trying to rescue them. Arizona man Balbir Singh Sadi was a Sikh who became the victim of a hate crime. He was killed 4 days after 9/11 when a Boeing employee wanted to retaliate for the attacks on the World Trade Center. Sadi is listed on the Arizona State Memorial as a victim of 9/11. If you could harvest every organ and chemical in the human body, you would make around $45 million. This is a 1999 photo of Tom Klebold helping his son Dylan get ready for the Columbine prom. Little did he know, his son would help kill 13 people in the school just 3 days later. In 2015, sex worker Heather Saul shot and killed a man after grabbing his gun while he was trying to rape her. When police arrived to investigate, they found a massive kill kit in the dead man's car. They would later credit Heather with stopping an active serial killer. The well-endowed man behind this legendary image is none other than Wardy Joubert III. He was a football coach and preacher who sadly died in 2016 from a heart attack at the age of 45. When a photojournalist took this picture of a little girl in Syria, she raised her arms in surrender because she thought the camera was a gun. In 2011, a Pakistani woman was sentenced to life in prison for killing and cooking her husband because he wanted a physical relationship with their daughter. Ignaz Semmelweis was the doctor who discovered that washing your hands prevents the spread of many diseases. But since this went against the popular medical opinion of his time, he was committed to a mental asylum where he was beaten so badly that he died of gangrene from the wounds. Just 2 years after filming Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick killed 2 women while driving on the wrong side of the road in Ireland. He said he had no recollection of the incident and got off with a $175 fine. A male gorilla named Michael learned sign language and once used it to describe his mother being shot and killed by poachers. 2 years ago, a distress message was found in a can of sardines saying, "We are Sudanese laborers enslaved by this company." An investigation was opened by Egyptian authorities, but nothing ever came of it. Genghis Khan would marry off one of his daughters to the king of an allied nation and then assign his new son-in-law to military duty. As Khan expected, most of these son-in-laws would die in combat, giving his daughters complete control over these nations. While Keanu Reeves was filming The Matrix, his daughter was stillborn at 8 months. The tragedy caused he and his girlfriend to break up shortly before she was killed in a car crash. Since then, he has donated most of his earnings from movies and has avoided serious relationships and having kids. In the 1500s, Mapuche warrior Galvarino had both his hands cut off as punishment for defying the Spanish. He returned home, raised an army, and fought the Spanish with blades tied to the stubs of his hands. Khalif Browder was imprisoned at Rikers Island for 3 years without a trial after allegedly stealing a backpack. He spent 730 days alone in solitary confinement whilst awaiting his trial. He was finally released in 2013 after his innocence was proven, but he took his own life just 2 years later. In 2011, a 17-year-old Chinese boy sold his kidney on the black market so that he could buy the new iPhone and iPad. 8 years later, the man's other kidney failed and now he's bedridden for life. The men in white are the surviving members of the original San Francisco Gay Men's Choir. The rest represent those who were lost to AIDS. American Airlines assured a blind woman that they would help her off the plane after the other passengers had gotten off. They then proceeded to forget about her and locked the plane while she was still inside. In 2013, a Clemson student ran an experiment to help turtles safely cross roads. So he placed a fake turtle in the road to observe driver behavior and accidentally discovered something disturbing. He found that 6% of people deliberately went out of their way to hit the turtle. In the 1960s, Michael Jackson's father Joseph wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving the windows open at night. So one night when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through his window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. According to a survey, more than half of all commercial pilots have fallen asleep during a flight. 29% of these pilots claim they've woken up before and seen the co-pilot asleep as well. In 2010, a Polish man wanted doctors to remove a years-long cyst on the back of his head. Upon further examination, doctors found that the cyst was actually a .22 caliber bullet lodged in his scalp. He hadn't noticed it because he was drunk at the party where he was likely shot 5 years earlier. In 2001, the FBI warned Russell Crowe that Al-Qaeda was planning to kidnap him as part of a cultural destabilization plot. For 2 years, the FBI publicly guarded Crowe and refused to give him any details on the threat. Medical mistakes kill over 250,000 Americans each year. If they were a disease, they'd be the third leading cause of death in the U.S. behind cancer and heart disease. Jim Creighton was the first baseball superstar according to historians. In 1862, he swung so hard into a home run that he ruptured his bladder and died. Titanic designer Thomas Andrews was on board the ship when it sank. His original design included more safety features such as watertight compartments and twice as many lifeboats. But his ideas were rejected since they'd make the boat appear less attractive. He spent his last moments trying to evacuate passengers and his body was never recovered. A former FBI agent has claimed that Tupac's boss Suge Knight financed the murder of Biggie in 1997. The intended target was actually Biggie's boss Sean P. Diddy Combs, who was in the car in front of Biggie at the time. In 2015, Airbnb held a contest where the winner got to spend the night in the Paris catacombs, which hold the remains of 6 million people. In 1915, the U.S. Postal Service banned the mailing of people after a 4-year-old girl was sent across the state of Idaho by her parents. A man whose headaches were so painful they made him vomit has finally found the source of his problem. A tapeworm has been lodged in his brain for 10 years after eating undercooked pork in Mexico. Through her grandmother Mary, Queen Elizabeth is a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler. This technically makes Prince Charles the heir to Dracula's bloodline. The urine of a diabetic contains so much sugar that it can be purified and made into a high-end single malt whiskey. Rabies is such a deadly disease that you're more likely to survive being shot in the head. Only 14 people in recorded medical history have ever survived rabies, and all of them suffered permanent brain damage. There are tiny bugs closely related to spiders living in the pores of your face, which crawl onto your face to mate while you're sleeping. In 2006, a team of scientists in Iceland were freezing clams to study the effects of climate change. They ended up accidentally killing the oldest known animal in the world, a 507-year-old ocean quahog clam named Ming. When North Korea was battling food shortages last year, Kim Jong-un ordered his citizens to give up their dogs. Authorities went door to door forcefully confiscating all canines, which were then sold to meat markets to be eaten. This is the world's heaviest woman in 1922 as compared to the world's heaviest person today. A Japanese ice rink once put 5,000 dead fish in their ice so that their customers could skate over a frozen ocean. The attraction was closed immediately after public outrage. An Iranian woman underwent 50 surgeries and dropped to 90 pounds in a catastrophic attempt to look like Angelina Jolie. While filming The Wizard of Oz, 16-year-old Judy Garland was put on quite the extreme diet. It consisted of chicken soup, coffee, and roughly 80 cigarettes per day. Oh, and check out my Insta, it's active again. Baby Molly Gibson was born in October of 2020, but she was technically 27 years old at her birth, just 2 years younger than her mom. Her embryo was donated in 1992 and stored in a liquid nitrogen tank until she was adopted in 2020 for in vitro fertilization. In 1994, a Russian pilot allowed his 16-year-old son to sit at the controls of the plane. But his son accidentally disabled the autopilot, crashing the plane and killing all 75 passengers on board. From the time of its discovery to its demotion, Pluto didn't even make one full revolution around the sun. If you hit someone with your car in China, you must pay for their medical care for the rest of their life. But if you kill someone with your car, you only have to pay a one-time fee. For this reason, it's common for people to go back and kill someone they accidentally hit. In a 1974 art performance, Marina Abramovich told visitors she wouldn't move for 6 hours no matter what they did to her. She placed 72 items on a table and invited people to use them on her however they pleased with no punishment. There are objects for pleasure including a rose, perfume, and wine, as well as objects for pain including scissors, a whip, and a loaded gun. Visitors were gentle to begin with, but gradually got more aggressive as they became comfortable. Within 3 hours, all of her clothes had been completely cut off, and some people even started slicing her skin. She was sexually assaulted various times and had rose thorns stuck in her abdomen. One person even held the gun to her head until someone else took it away. Afterwards, Abramovich said, "If you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you." Born in 1661, Charles II of Spain was the result of 200 years of inbreeding that intended to strengthen the family line. He was breastfed until the age of 4 and never fully learned how to walk. As an adult, he was completely illiterate and could barely chew or speak due to his deformed jaw. He was so ugly and disfigured that his own wife was terrified of him. In 2010, a Canadian man rescued a newborn baby from a dumpster only to find out that he was the father. In isolation wards where patients die alone, nurses fill gloves with warm water to simulate the touch of their loved ones. They call it the hand of God. In 1990, British Airways Flight 5390 experienced a window failure in the cockpit, causing the captain to be sucked out. But the crew held on to him for 20 minutes and he miraculously survived despite some frostbite and a few fractures. Shortly after going missing for 6 days, Edgar Allan Poe died a mysterious death. When he was found, he was wearing another man's cheap clothing and couldn't explain where he'd been. Acting delirious and distressed, he was brought to the hospital where he died of unknown causes at the age of 40. Bella and Edward's relationship throughout the Twilight series meets all 15 official criteria for an abusive relationship. Up until the 1800s, Turkish women who were accused of cheating on their husbands were tied up in a sack filled with cats, then thrown in the ocean. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up damaging only one office room and he was the only person that died. To unlock the secrets of a genius, the man who performed Einstein's autopsy stole his brain and kept it in a jar for 20 years. He found that the part of Einstein's brain that processes math and language was 15% bigger than the average human's. Throughout history, a total of 9 nuclear submarines have been lost around the world. Most of them are still on the ocean floor with nuclear weapons that are still intact. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a hickey. The suction created a blood clot that traveled to his brain, eventually causing a stroke. When the Soviet Union was pushing toward Berlin during World War II, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. On Halloween in 1974, Ronald O'Brien laced his 8-year-old son's pixie sticks with cyanide so that he could claim the boy's life insurance. He also gave the candy to 4 other kids to set up the story that a local madman had poisoned them. Once police received word of the first boy's death, 3 of the 4 remaining candies were recovered quickly, but 1 was still out there. When the parents of this final child were informed by police, they became hysterical when they couldn't find the pixie stick in their son's bag. So they rushed upstairs to find the boy in his bed with the poisoned candy in his hand. He had thankfully been unable to open the wrapper because of the staple that was used to reseal it. So Timothy O'Brien ended up being the only confirmed case of a kid dying from poisoned Halloween candy, and it was done by his own father. After a failed circumcision led to a sex reassignment surgery, David Reimer was raised as a girl. Once he found out that he was in fact not a girl, Reimer started living as a male at the age of 15. But after years of suffering from severe depression and confusion, Reimer took his own life at the age of 38. Many shelters won't allow black cats to be adopted around Halloween time, out of fear that they might be tortured or sacrificed. In many cities across the US, people on the sex offender registry have to keep their outdoor lights off during Halloween. This is a 1948 photo of a Chicago mother hiding her face in shame after putting her children up for sale. 2 of them were sold to an abusive family for $2 apiece so that their mother could afford rent. Their new father would often tie them up in a barn and force them to work long hours, often referring to them as slaves. If you were to swim near a pod of narwhals and happen to hear one whistle, it might be the last thing that you ever hear. The sounds that narwhals make are so loud that they're said to be deafening to humans. In 2006, a 38-year-old woman who had been missing for 3 years was found dead in her London home with the TV still running. Cats have contributed to the extinction of at least 63 global vertebrate species. They're often considered to be one of the most environmentally damaging invasive predators on the planet. In 2018, a woman who received a lung transplant went into anaphylactic shock after eating peanuts even though she'd never been allergic before. She later discovered that the boy who gave her the lungs had a peanut allergy and actually died from anaphylactic shock himself. In 1912, President Teddy Roosevelt was shot in the chest just before giving a speech. Upon noticing the bullet missed his lungs, he carried on despite the blood seeping from his shirt. He delivered the full 90-minute speech before accepting medical attention. The first bomb dropped by the Allies during World War II killed the only elephant in the Berlin Zoo. Alfonso Flores from Texas received a major cosmetic surgery to increase his height from 5'11" to 6'1". He claimed it allowed him to finally achieve his dream of becoming tall. In 2009, Larry Maria Moncada from Iowa disappeared after working his shift at the supermarket. He was missing for more than a decade until his body was found when the supermarket was renovated. The man had fallen into a small gap between the wall and cooler, likely dying from dehydration after a few days of being stuck. Brooke Greenberg was an American woman with an unknown condition called Syndrome X that prevented her from aging. She was 20 years old at the time of her death, but never developed physically or mentally past the age of 1. To make a sword from the blood of your enemies, you would have to kill over 300 people to get enough iron. The US military sends many of its doctors to Chicago to give them practice on gunshot wounds. During World War II, the Soviets tried to train dogs to run under enemy tanks with bombs strapped to their backs. However, this plan fortunately ended up backfiring for the Soviets. Because the dogs had been trained using Soviet tanks, many dogs ended up running to them during actual combat, blowing up friendly tanks instead. In 1987, Kenneth Parks drove 12 miles to his mother-in-law's house and stabbed her to death in the middle of the night. But he didn't receive any jail time because Parks' lawyer was able to prove that he was sleepwalking the entire time. The bolt at the top of a helicopter shaft that holds it all together is called the Jesus nut. It got its name because if it fails in flight, the only thing left to do is to pray to Jesus. Viking warriors who were badly wounded were given onion soup to test whether or not they would survive. Someone would smell the wounds after a few minutes, and if onions were detected, it meant that death was imminent. Pedro Lopez is a Colombian serial killer who was sentenced in 1980 after murdering more than 300 young girls. But after serving 18 years in Ecuadorian prison, he was released on good behavior in 1998, and his current whereabouts are unknown. In 1997, Bill Cosby's son Ennis was killed in a failed robbery attempt while he was changing a tire. Cosby was working toward his doctorate in special education and planned on building a school for children with disabilities. In 1971, a thief broke into a home and was shot in the legs by a trap set by the homeowner. The thief then sued the homeowner for damages and won. In 1999, a 26-year-old Polish man murdered his father with a screwdriver before making a mask out of his face. He then put on the mask along with his father's clothes and had his grandfather over for breakfast. Due to his poor hearing and eyesight, the old man swore he was talking to his son the entire time. The crime was only discovered when the grandfather found his son's body and called police. The killer was deemed clinically insane after claiming that the murder was an artistic work. This is the last known photo of Freddie Mercury before his death in 1991. In order to avoid the attention, Freddie denied rumors about having AIDS until the day before he died. During the Middle Ages, it was believed that sperm produced from the left testicle resulted in having a girl. So to ensure having a son, men would often have their left testicle removed in a painful surgery. In the 1960s, Canadian woodsman Francis Wharton shot a deer and made dentures out of its teeth. He then proceeded to eat the deer with the deer's own teeth. A cat named Oscar correctly predicted the deaths of over 50 patients at a nursing home in Rhode Island. Soon after he arrived at the home, staff noticed that Oscar chose to nap next to patients who would die a few hours later. Nurses would sometimes even place Oscar next to patients they thought would die, but he would move to other patients and be correct every time. In 2018, Sarah and Jennifer Hart drove a van carrying their 6 adopted children off a cliff. It was officially ruled a murder-suicide since the racist couple were abusive to their children for years. They only decided to end it all when they felt authorities closing in on their crimes. North Korean founder Kim Il-sung had a baseball-sized tumor on the back of his head that propaganda officials worked hard to hide. As a result, this is one of the only photos ever taken of the tumor. This disturbing drawing was created by a nonverbal dementia patient in a nursing home. A hitchhiking robot that relied on the kindness of strangers to travel the world made it safely across Canada, Germany, and the Netherlands. But just 2 weeks into its American tour, Hitchbot was found in Philadelphia with its arms and head ripped off. An 18-year-old girl from Alaska was encouraged to murder her best friend by a boy she met online who claimed to be a multimillionaire. She then convinced 4 others to help her so that they could split a $9 million prize. It ended up being a total scam perpetrated by a mentally disabled man from Indiana. The assassin bug wears the corpses of its prey like a backpack. After stabbing its prey and slurping out the innards, the insect uses the corpses as armor and camouflage. In 1991, Patricia Stallings was sentenced to life in prison for poisoning her child with antifreeze. She then gave birth to a second child while in prison, who was given to a foster care. But he eventually became sick with the same symptoms as the first child, indicating a rare metabolic disorder, not poisoning. This proved her innocence and she was released. You can literally die from pooping too hard, and it's actually pretty common. Nearly all cases involve people with bad hearts, who just pushed a little too hard. One of the most notable people who died this way is Elvis Presley. Up until the 1950s, cigarettes were used to treat people with asthma along with other pulmonary conditions. 30 years ago, you had about 17 minutes to escape a house fire. Today, that's down to about 3 to 4 minutes due to many of the highly flammable synthetic materials used in furniture. After a mass shooting, you would expect complete silence at the scene of the crime. But police say one of the eeriest things is all of the phones that ring when family members are trying to find out if their loved ones are okay. In 2017, a billionaire from Brazil announced that he was gonna bury his Bentley for his afterlife. After receiving a lot of online hate for his wasteful decision, he revealed that it was simply a publicity stunt for organ donations. He said people bury things that are much more valuable than cars and nobody seems to care. Patty Mallet became pregnant at age 17 and was pressured by multiple people to abort the baby, but she refused. That baby was Justin Bieber. The Titanic fired 8 emergency flares before it sank. A ship in the area saw the flares and that the boat looked uneven in the water. But the captain didn't believe that the rockets were fired in distress, so he didn't take action. If he had, all of the Titanic's passengers could have been rescued, but instead help didn't arrive for more than 2 hours. In 1969, an astrologer warned John Lennon that he would be shot on an island. John was so disturbed by this that it caused him to cancel an upcoming yacht trip around the Greek islands. 11 years later, John Lennon would be shot and killed on the island of Manhattan. The day after Robin Williams died, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline received the highest number of calls in its history. It is estimated that there are still approximately 40 million slaves in the world today. About 70% of them are women, while 25% of them are children. The Bunker brothers were a pair of conjoined twins who made the term Siamese twins popular. They were a famous sideshow act in North Carolina until one day one of the brothers woke up to find that his twin had died. In a panic, he called for a doctor to perform an emergency separation, but it was already too late. He would die just 3 hours after his brother. Pablo Picasso used to carry around a revolver loaded with blanks, and when people asked him about the meaning of his paintings, he would pretend to shoot them in the face. In 2012, 66-year-old Stevie Crecelius went to the hospital thinking he had a kidney stone. During that visit, he would find out that he actually had a strange condition and had been a woman his whole life. Nicolas Cage has already bought his grave, and it's a 9-foot-tall pyramid in Louisiana. In 2005, a suicidal man in California parked his car in front of a commuter train. The train hit his car but derailed and collided with 2 additional trains. The accident resulted in 11 deaths and nearly 200 injuries, but the man survived and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Whiskey distiller Jack Daniel died after kicking his safe because he forgot his combination. He injured his big toe and it got infected, so he had to have his foot amputated. But the infection spread to the rest of his system and he died from complications. On 9/11, there was only one American in space, and this is the photo he took from the International Space Station. The first person to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge was a professional high diver. He wanted to demonstrate that people don't die simply from falling through the air, and he was correct. He fell 135 feet through the air without a problem, but hitting the water killed him immediately. Masabumi Hosono was the only Japanese passenger on the Titanic, and he managed to survive the sinking. But after returning to his home country, he was publicly condemned and lost his job for not going down with the other passengers. President JFK's brain has been missing from the National Archives for more than 50 years. Stanley Meyer was one of the first to invent a car that was completely powered by water. He claimed that it was capable of traveling across the country on just 72 liters of tap water, which would have revolutionized the auto industry and made gasoline obsolete. But shortly after creating the car, Stanley died while meeting with investors. His brother said he ran out of the restaurant choking, looked at him and said, "They've poisoned me." In 2015, YouTube prankster Sam Pepper lured Sam Goldback into a staged nightmare, faking his kidnapping with Colby Brock in on the plan. Sam was tied to a chair with a hood over his head, then forced to watch as a masked abductor held his best friend Colby at gunpoint before appearing to execute him at point-blank range. Sam's screams and sobs were genuine. He believed he'd just witnessed the murder of his best friend. But just moments later, Colby revealed it was all just an elaborate prank. The video drew massive backlash for its cruelty and for mimicking real-life execution videos, with critics calling it one of the most disturbing stunts in YouTube history. In the 1820s, Surgeon William Beaumont made history by experimenting on a man whose gunshot wound left a permanent hole in his stomach. He tied bits of food to strings, lowered them inside, and then pulled them out to watch them dissolve, sometimes peering directly into the man's gut or draining stomach acid to test it on food outside of his body. These grotesque experiments became the first to prove that digestion was a chemical process driven by gastric juices, making Beaumont both a pioneer of physiology and one of the more unsettling figures in medical history. Pamela Anderson contracted hepatitis C in the 90s after sharing a tattoo needle with her husband Tommy Lee, who never told her he had the deadly virus. Doctors warned her it could kill her within 10 years, and the virus slowly attacked her liver while she suffered from chronic fatigue, weakness, and bouts of depression. At her lowest, she described feeling like her body was rotting from the inside as the disease forced her out of the spotlight and into isolation. For over a decade, she lived with the fear of cancer or liver failure, until she was finally cured in 2015 by a breakthrough antiviral treatment. In 2004, 7-year-old Tyler Moon became a walking miracle after a horrific quad crash left both he and his father critically injured in the Australian bush. Despite suffering 2 collapsed lungs filling with blood, 7 broken ribs, and a shattered arm, the boy staggered for nearly a kilometer through dense forest to reach help. When he finally reached his mother's house, he managed to say, "Dad said you should call an ambulance," before collapsing on the ground. Doctors said it was a miracle that Tyler survived at all, let alone saved someone else's life in the process. In 2021, Miss Zhang from Weifang, China underwent a routine double eyelid cosmetic procedure, but during the operation, she felt extremely uncomfortable in her left eye, only to later discover that her eyeball had been accidentally sewn to the outer corner of her eyelid. Despite stitch removal, a thin thread-like tether still remained between her eyeball and eyelid. Attempts to surgically detach them failed, causing her eye to become inflamed and fused once again. She's now left with blurred vision and severely limited eye movement, able to move her eye only by turning her entire head. In December of 24, 46-year-old Nurhawati Zahora was ambushed by a 13-foot crocodile while washing her feet in murky Indonesian waters. The reptile quickly dragged her under in a brutal death roll, spilling her blood into the water as horrified villagers could only watch. Nearly an hour later, it resurfaced with her lifeless body clamped in its jaws, forcing locals to toss raw chickens into the water to distract it before they could recover her remains. Witnesses described the scene as worse than hell, and authorities later hunted down and shot the crocodile. Here's a photo of 2 tourists posing inside the Claw of Death at Chernobyl, a massive crane used to scoop up chunks of radioactive reactor core after the 1986 meltdown. The machine is still so contaminated that standing near it can deliver radiation doses dozens of times higher than a chest X-ray, and its rusted frame is coated in radioactive dust that can cling to hair, skin, or clothing. While a brief picture likely won't cause immediate sickness, the exposure adds to long-term cancer risk, and any contamination they brought home could be far deadlier. It remains one of the most dangerously toxic relics of the exclusion zone, yet people still climb inside it for a photo op. In 2000, a Tahitian man named Fidel Maruhi pulled off one of the most unlikely survivals in aviation history. He stowed away in the wheel well of a Boeing 747 bound for Los Angeles. For 7.5 hours, he endured sub-zero temperatures and near total lack of oxygen, and when rescuers found him, his core body temperature was just 79 degrees Fahrenheit, a level usually considered fatal. But against all odds, he lived, and when asked why he'd risk such a death-defying stunt, he explained his dream was to reach France simply so he could shake hands with soccer legend Zinedine Zidane. In Dante's Inferno, hell is divided into 9 circles, each one reserved for a specific sin. Today we take a tour of these 9 circles with real-life stories to match. Jean Meslier was a Catholic priest for 40 years, known for his extensive charity work and devotion. But after his death in 1729, a hidden 633-page manuscript revealed that he had secretly been an atheist the entire time. He admitted to becoming a priest only to please his parents, called religion a castle in the air, and condemned faith as a tool of oppression. Tamika Hargrave died while cheating on her husband with her car mechanic. They were getting it on inside of a closed garage while the car was still running and eventually passed out from carbon monoxide. Their unclothed bodies were later found by Tamika's husband. In 2004, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after doctors spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years to the point where her skin had completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail and her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. Known as the Witch of Wall Street, Hetty Green was once the richest woman in America. But she became infamous for her overly obsessive frugality. She refused to pay for heat, medical care, or clean clothes. Her son's leg once had to be amputated because she delayed treatment while searching for a free clinic. Hetty eventually died from a stroke while arguing over the cost of skim milk. In 1982, South Korean police officer Woo Bum Khan went on one of the deadliest killing rampages in world history. After his girlfriend woke him up by swatting a fly that was on his chest, he armed himself with rifles, grenades, and a service revolver, then spent the entire night moving from village to village, posing as a cop while massacring civilians in their homes. He cut phone lines, lobbed grenades into houses, and shot entire families in their sleep. By dawn, 56 people were dead and dozens more were injured. As police closed in, he ended the fury by taking his own life. Jim Jones began as a fiery Christian preacher with a passion for social justice. But behind the scenes, he rejected the Bible, called himself the reincarnation of Jesus, Buddha, and Lenin, and claimed true salvation could only be achieved through him. In 1978, he led over 900 followers, including 300 children, to a remote jungle in Guyana where they were forced to take their own lives. Their bodies were found piled in rows with their faces blue and arms entwined, proof of what happens when a heretic convinces others that he's a god. Serial killer Richard Ramirez quite literally made violence his religion. Breaking into homes at random, he often restrained entire families and carried out horrifying acts in front of them, designed to mentally and physically destroy his victims in their final moments. In multiple cases, he forced his victims to swear allegiance to the devil before killing them, and left pentagrams drawn across walls and even carved into his victim's skin. In one case, the sadistic killer gouged out a woman's eyes while she was still breathing. His crimes weren't just brutal, they were ritualistic expressions of chaos, cruelty, and complete devotion to evil. For nearly 18 years, Frenchman Jean-Claude Roman pretended to be a successful doctor with the WHO despite never graduating from medical school. He lived off of money from family and friends, claiming he was investing it into elite hedge funds. But in 1993, as his elaborate web of lies began to unravel, Roman chose mass murder over being exposed. He bludgeoned his wife to death with a rolling pin, shot his 2 children in the head, then calmly joined his parents for lunch before killing them and their dog. Roman was arrested and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 1996, 16-year-old Travis Lewis pleaded guilty to the murder of Sally McKay. While seeking closure, Sally's daughter Martha visited Travis several times while he was in prison, eventually forgiving him for killing her mother. When he got out on parole 23 years later, Martha allowed Travis to move in with her and gave her a job as groundskeeper of her estate. But when she discovered the man was frequently stealing from her, Martha fired Travis and kicked him out. Soon afterwards, Travis broke into Martha's house and stabbed her to death before drowning in a nearby lake while on the run from police.